Magic is for me what makes fantasy books the most addictive stories that you can read. And here are my 10 favorite magic systems that I've ever read. And you won't believe how unique and epic are the magic systems in the top 5 books that I have in this list. A magic system usually refers to the rules, limitations and abilities that define the magic, and that's what we are going to be talking about. And we will start with a story that it's very dark, that has a setting that it's gloomy, that is grim, and therefore the magic system revolves about necromancy and about elden magic and the ability to compel others. And I'm talking about The Empire of the Wolf, or the first book, The Justice of Kings. I remember while reading this story feeling so incredibly charmed about the idea of having our main character tapping into different types of magic. Magic here plays a very important role in society, and it's usually considered for the people that it's kind of like the police, the justice here, and they use this magic in order to convey people to tell the truth, and also they're detectives so they can talk with the dead. I found that to be incredibly unique, like how you use that elden necromant magic in order to find truth and find order and settle that in society just displays a huge amount of, power limitations. And in this story we see that being tackled. And there are some incredibly weird scenes where you see this main character raising the dead and just questioning them about who killed them. And that was like shocking. But at the same time, it's just the beginning, because you're able to see like way more of this elden magic. And throughout the story, you will discover what happens. This magic, it's not only being used as, doing the good, but it's also a key part of what is going to happen in this world. I loved it. We continue with a story that has a very trainable magic system, but what I love the most is the consequences and how even if you want to be powerful, there's a limit to yourself and you need to manage that, and that has profound consequences to your day-to-day, especially if you are supposed to be leading. It plays a key role in the story, but it's not really the main thing of the story. It's just a very interesting element that revolves around it, but the thing that shines in this story are the characters, and how they live throughout this magic system is what makes most of them a part of their arc. And this is the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. So in here, magic revolves around jade, this precious metal that it only appears in one land, Keikon. In here, the jade allows us people to have special abilities. You can have super strength, you can heal. There are different lines of work in which you can use the jade. The trick though is that you need to train in order to learn how to wield that jade. It's not that you suddenly find that jade and now you have that power for you and you can, really easy access to that power and be powerful and, never be beaten. No, that's not how it works here. Actually, you need to train, and there's also a limit, because the more jade that you can wear, the more powerful you are. But there are limitations, and we will see them. One of our main characters will really struggle with these. He is at the top position in this Godfather-like story with this Godfather Kung Fu kind of story will have these two different men fighting for the control of this precious metal. And the great thing here is that not everyone can wield that jade. So you need to be able to wear it, and you need to train in order so that you don't go mad. We go next to a story in which the magic system, it's subtle, but it is profoundly important to the story. It's not that it enhances the quality of our characters, but the proper idea of magic is what has our story going and moving forward, and what makes it so incredibly terrible. And this is a story about language, about words, and about the power of translation. In here, the magic system revolves around people being able to know profoundly what is the meaning of language. And in silver bars, they're able to write in one side one word, and then in the other they need to translate it. And the gap between those two words is what changes reality, which I think it's so, if you think about it, like, it's very meta. You can think on how the labels that we set on things change our perception about them, and that is Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is dark academia story, a standalone at its finest, and one of the limitations is that you truly need to learn that language. Often you need for that language to be your first language, which makes this story so hard to read at times, because although we will be in Oxford, it's this university where there's these different levels in depending on the level in which you are advancing on the level of magic. The idea is that even if this is Britain, people, these wizards, these magicians need to bring people from the colonies because they need them talking other languages, Mandarin, Indian, others. They need them in order to conquer the world for them, which you can see already being very, very... So we will see a situation in which our main characters grasp around their language is what it's helping Britain conquer their own original countries, which it's complex. It's an angry book that it's very well researched, that you learn while you're reading, and just it feels gorgeous, it is terrible, and it is unforgettable. Next we will continue with a story that it's perhaps known by a lot of you, but I didn't know really which was the main things about this magic until I started reading this story. I knew this was one of the most popular fantasy series that you can read, that this is a classic. It is long both in scope, long also in pages. Like the series, it's massive. We're talking here about 14 books. But what makes it so great, it's that the proper idea of the magic, it's also nuanced. And it's the first time that I've read something that it's very unique in terms of if you're a woman, you can access to this part. If you're a man, you can access to these. But then we have other layers. We have different kind of like orders. And I'm talking about the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. And here we have like the true power, the source, and there are two parts of that power that you can wield, the female side and the male side. The limitations are really, really different. For the women wielding this power, it's usually a matter of training, of control, and they can become and be trained as Aes Sedai. They can choose these different lines because they can wield these different elements, right? And that for the men, there's way more on you can go wrong here, because men usually wielding this power turn them mad, which it's very interesting because they have more power but they can go mad, but women have more control and they are at its best doing it. And that is a very interesting way to look at magic. And you also have the tainted power, so that part in which was darkened by the bad one here, and allows certain people to also be incredibly powerful. And magic here also has a certain limitations. You cannot wield magic for a lot of time, it just kind of runs out and you can be burned. But also as you wield more magic, your lifespan just lengthens. It's very interesting to see how magic can both consume you but lengthen your life, and how you can also get addicted to it. There are other magical elements such as visions that intertwine here, and also magical artifacts. So there's a whole magical and fantastical world that I bet you will love if you pick this one up. The next one, it's a book that has a magic that it's creepy, that it's weird, and I loved it because of that. Not everyone knows how to use this magic, and therefore not everyone is able to convey this. But in this whole story, we will be blending more of, in one hand, elemental magic, and in the other, this hard magic system in which you really need to be able to use it, and you need to learn how to do that. And that is The Drowning Empire by Andreas. In one hand, we have this bone shard magic, this hard magic system in which certain people in this kingdom, in this empire, it's able to craft instructions in bones. The thing is that these bones need to be taken from people, like bones need to be from humans. And it's when you put these bones together in these animal-like creatures where they can really rise these constructs, and they can basically tell them to do stuff. So you will need to be able to inscribe these bones and to put the others together. And there's this very organic way of magic in which you can take the bones out, and that will render the construct unable to do anything. But in order to either put or remove that, you need to be special. And I found that really fascinating because because our main character will need to learn that, and it is complex and it is weird and people knows it, and these constructs can go and they can be sentient and they are given very important places in this society. And then in the other hand, we will have this magic system that leans more towards the elemental, that we're able to wield the winds, the water, and there's also an animal companion. So really this book has a lot of elements that just makes it so wonderful. Next, we have a magic system that it's both incredibly smart, incredibly funny, and it's so action-based, but at the same time feels so you need to be kind of like a scholar in order to do these. And that is the Founders Trilogy by Robert Jackson Bennett. In this case, what we have is that there's these different houses, and they've kind of like mastered the idea in which they can inscribe elements and they can convince those elements to behave in a certain way. Every element is sentient, and they are convinced of their reality and they behave in the way that they do because that's what they believe. And in here, if you want to change that behavior, you need to discover a set of rules to convince these elements that they need to behave different. And the great thing here is that our main character is able to sense what these objects are feeling or what they are thinking, which oftentimes is,
I need to get close, I need to remain here, like I'm standing here.
And she will need to convince these objects to behave differently. So there's this dialogue in which our main character is like, no, but you really want to open this because what you want is to really to be open and to allow people to not being able to discover what there is at the other side. So there's a lot of trickery and you need to be smart, and I loved it. And I will be hanged if we have a magic system video without talking about the magic that Sanderson created. And the most popular one is perhaps Mistborn, but it's not necessarily the best one, but we will start there. In here, the key idea is that we will have investiture, which is this element, this magic that allows the whole cosmere, this whole universe that Sanderson has created to be magical. And there's so many interesting things, but one of the core elements that I absolutely love about the whole world is that our characters can access that magic because they are different. If you pass through some traumatic situations in the past, you're more suitable to access to that magic, which makes this so incredibly endearing. It just allows people to, pass terrible situations, but also being able to do magic. And what really makes Mistborn so interesting is that we're able to really understand and narrow down which are the consequences of each of the actions and the limitations of the magic. In here, there are 3 elements of magic combined. We usually hear more about the allomancy, which is the ability of our characters to ingest metals and then they are able to consume those metals and display powers. There are 16 different metals that you can ingest between the allomancies and all of that. So already you can see how the scope and profoundness of how magic affects the story here is displayed. We see how usually people it's able to wield one of those metals because each of those metals allow you to have different powers. You can fly, you can manipulate stuff. There's a lot, but then you have all the 2 layers. Sanderson introduces here ferrochemy and metallurgy. So there's the powers in which you can, in one side, kind of like put sticks on you and store magic for yourself, and then you can also steal magic from others. So that's what makes Mistborn oftentimes a story that it's so profoundly magic driven and just it's very blow your mind kind of, because you have to understand and to go through and discover this magic with the metals, and the action scenes are incredible. But then just when you were so used to what you were reading, there are other elements that are introduced. It is phenomenal. But Sanderson, being him, just like he takes whatever it is in a story and just makes it phenomenal. We have also stamps and we have also blood magic. And I actually really like the Emperor's Soul because of that. It's perhaps for how short this story is, one of the best ideas that you can have. The way in which stamps can change reality feels fascinating. We have this character that it's able to rewrite things and bring back memories, and she will be tasked with bringing back the soul of the emperor, which is very fascinating. But he also has blood magic, so there's like a lot. But if you enjoy magic that goes more towards the dream worlds, you can also enjoy a standalone that is Yumi Andaline the Painter, because in here you have this not only wonderful world in which there's always kind of like darkness, and it's only illuminated by these two neon lines, water is purple and all of that is blue, which in your mind is already like, wow, what I'm reading. But nightmares come to life, and there's these certain people that are able to draw those nightmares and therefore are able to remove the whole power of these nightmares. That in itself, it's incredible, like how quick you can draw this nightmare when you're facing it, and how you can be trained in order to do that is what basically keeps part of this world alive. There's way more to this story, so I beg you to read it. But it's the magic that we see in Stormlight what really steals the show here. There's this surge binding, and I don't want to spoil a lot because it is very subtle in the first book and you start learning the magic as you read, so I won't spoil that for you. But the idea is that you need to meet a certain limitations. You need to be worth of your magic, and you need to set a certain ideals in order to be able to access it. And you will have these 10 different authors in which each of them has a slightly different way in which they can access to that, and just you can almost fly, you can run the winds, or you can weave magic, you can travel to different parts. It is so fascinating, and it is great because it's not only that magic allows our characters to defend themselves, but it is also what it's creating a new shift in society. And now we go to a dark necromancy magic that goes so far, and it is so well done. That really is what steals the show here. It's one of those books that once that you read it, you don't really understand what you are reading, but you know it's good, so you keep reading, and eventually it's not that you understand, but you feel fulfilled. And that is The Locked Tomb with the first book, Gideon the Ninth. I've only read this one, but I was in awe about what the author was able to do here. So we have necromancy, and it's displayed in these 9 different houses. This is on space, so each of these houses is basically one planet, and the idea is that you can wield the forces of life and the forces of death, but you can also blend it with wielding different elements. And that's what ultimately make each of these houses, each of these necromancers so unique. Although all of them are necromancers, they have different powers. Some, yes, convey more with the dead, but there are others that use that to see the future. There are others that are wielding those bones in order to be more powerful, to protect themselves. It is really interesting. And what we see in this book, it's basically a tournament kind of story in which we suddenly go to a place that our characters don't know, the heirs of the different houses don't know, and they need to fight in order to win. And that's how you will get to see those different powers at use. I was mind blown really about this story. The next one, and we're getting to my favorites really, Savers Anderson. It's so great. It's non-stop action with top tier magic system. The Powder Mages trilogy by Brian McClelland. In here, what we see is again 3 layers of magic, which makes it for a very important element in society as well. And it blends very different elements. In one side, you can be born with that power, so you can be a proper sorcerer. And even if you are a sorcerer, it's not that you can wield magic and cast spells and that's basically it. Your power can be wielded depending on your hands. Like one hand allow you to have a different kind of magic with each finger that you use, and the other is kind of like the direction. So for the first time, or at least the first time that I read, the use of your hands kind of like makes sense. It's allowing you to have that different type of what you're doing. And I thought that was really fascinating. And in the other, you have what really steals, I guess, the show here, which is a very
complicated thing,
because people is able to sniff or ingest this powder, and I allow you to think which is the similarity here, but you can have that for powers. But it is not that you get all powerful and that's it, you just go on steroids to war, which in part you are. But the main thing here is that it allows you these incredible abilities to also modify stuff. So in this story, you have these guns. This is a flintlock story. So they have muskets and it is amazing. And whenever they ingest these powers, they have more strength. strength, but they are also able to modify the length and the direction and the velocity of the bullets that they fire. So imagine a war in which you can have sorcerers, but there you can also have infallible warriors. And then the third one, it's what basically I see myself being there. People that basically has a knack for magic, and it is not a big of a deal, and sometimes it feels weird. So there's people that never sleeps, people that can know when you're lying, and I can very much imagine in myself having the power of reading non-stop. This is a story that it's full of intrigue, very addictive, and with incredible high stakes. And in position number 1, a story that has a magic system that it's to die for. It is top tier, and I want to keep reading because I've only read the first book. It's a story that revolves around light and around colors, and how these colors can grant these different people abilities, and it can also modify their emotions. And yes, I'm talking about the Lightbringer series by Brent Weeks. A certain amount of people can see and wield colors, and this is a rare ability. These people can see, for example, blue or red or green, and they can draft those colors in magic. For example, if you are a red drafter, you can have the power of red, which is very liquid, very flammable, basically setting things on fire, but it will also modify your emotions, and you will be very angry. You can be, that volatile. You can draft the blue or the green, for example, which is a more solid substance, and it is almost like a shield for you, and you will be more serene in that sense. And I love the idea in which each color allows you to have a special ability, but it also has a cost and a modification in you. And the limit here is that you cannot be drafting this magic forever. The more you draft this magic, the quicker you are burning. And there's also a limitation in you. It's not that everyone can draft at the same part. There's a limit in yourself. Depending on what power you've been born with, you will be able to draft more or less. And then there's special people that are able to draft more than one color. And then we have the special one, the prism, the one that it's able to draft from all colors, and he can do this indefinitely. The thing with prisms is that they live a certain amount of years, and we're getting to the end of an era, it seems, for our prism. This story was full of action, of scenes, of war scenes in which we saw these different colors. They can see them, but there's some of them that can also have goggles in order to access that magic. And I really recommend it if you're seeking for a fantasy story that has that element that will really blow your mind. Let me know down below which is your favorite story or your favorite magic system. If you like this content so far, consider joining my Patreon. We currently have a readathon going. You can access the information for free on my Patreon and then decide if you want to join us. We also have a Wheel of Time read along, and we have a book club, and we're currently reading Stormlight Archive.